The night of October 9th covered the Dupree mansion with a thick fog, as if the air itself was trying to hide something. The lights outside the gate flickered erratically, reflecting distorted streaks of light on the wet road. The space seemed peaceful, but inside, every heartbeat, every breath of the people in this house was out of sync. The silence was no longer peace, but a sign of an impending storm. Everything after the chaotic night had changed. The walls bore scratches that no one could remember who had made. Someone's hand had scratched the paint as if trying to leave a sign of despair. Footsteps echoed lonesomely on the cold tile floor, but no one knew exactly whose they belonged to. A hidden alertness pervaded, as if everyone understood that tomorrow morning there might be someone who would no longer be on their side. Donnell walked in the darkness, his gaze heavy with hurt, like someone who had just realized he had trusted the wrong person. Vanessa was no longer the harmless figure he had thought. Haley and Danny, who had once called each other family, were now just two ends of a taut string about to snap. Andre was unnaturally quiet, but there was something in his eyes that was unreadable, cold as a premeditated plan. Outside, the wind whistled through the iron fence. Inside, the glances that met were no longer of sharing, but of suspicion. Everyone had a secret, and tonight, another secret would be revealed. No one knew what it would entail, a confession, another betrayal, or a price even greater than loss. In that silence, the house felt like a ticking bomb. With each passing second, each passing minute, the air grew thicker, and the feeling that the worst was yet to come spread like a rope around everyone's neck. No one was on each other's side anymore. There was no right or wrong. Only survival. The thick air in the Dupree mansion was like an invisible layer of smoke, slowly enveloping every brick, every window, every breath. The weak sunset light filtered through the cold iron fence, spreading a crimson hue across the lawn, like a bloodstain that someone had deliberately drawn out to remind them that nothing in this house was truly pure. When Haley entered the living room, all sound seemed to be sucked out, leaving only the pounding of her heart in her chest. Her eyes burned, not from pure anger but from a long-accumulated pent-up emotion, an emotion that had become a firestorm that threatened to consume everything around it. Danny was there. Leaning back in the velvet armchair, her gaze neither averted nor soft. She stood tall like a shadow that knew the future, that this moment could only end in ruin. Every vein in Haley's hand tightened as she clenched her fists. All the excuses, all the time calling each other family, every meal, every trusting look, all of it shattered in the moment Danny inched forward. Without a word, the accusation was written in their eyes, in the way their breaths mingled, like two wild animals about to pounce when the cage was unlocked. Those standing nearby, those who thought they were mere bystanders, began to feel the air thicken to the point of difficulty breathing. The confrontation between the two women was more than just a quarrel. It was the culmination of the hidden plots, of the betrayals that had crept through every hallway, every wall of this house. It all started with the smallest things, a caught glance, a deleted text, a postponed meeting. All of them seemed harmless, but over time they weaved into a giant spider web, and now Haley and Danny were suspended between the thin, deadly threads. Behind the door of the next room, Bill and Andre had also lost the only thing that held them together, silence. When the heavy words rang out, the sound hit the wall like iron bullets. The sound of wooden tables being smashed echoed, sending a wave of anger through the house. Andre never thought he could scream so loud. Bill never thought he would tremble with anger so much. Two men who were on the same side now looked at each other like mortal enemies. Between them was no longer arguments but the bitterness of secrets hidden for too long. Secrets that were thought to be buried deep, now torn open before the eyes of those who should not know. Anita, the woman who had been the emotional backbone of the family, sat in the hallway, her arms trembling as she held her little grandson. Every breath she took seemed to carry a silent despair. She looked through the cracks in the door, saw familiar faces now distorted by anger, saw eyes once warm now cold as ice. For years, she had kept this place standing, believed that no matter how many cracks there were, if we held each other's hands, this family would not fall. But she was wrong. No one can hold a house together when the people who live in it have stopped trusting each other. Things had started to go wrong long ago, but no one would admit it. A sum of money from an unknown source, a contract secretly altered, a promise never kept. Each event was a small stone, piled up into a wall no one could climb over. And when that wall was high enough, the truth was locked inside, leaving only skeptical glances outside. While Haley screamed with her eyes, Danny closed her eyes, feeling the weight pressing down on her shoulders. She knew, from this moment on, there was no turning back. No matter what she said, no matter how she explained, the trust was dead, and when trust is dead, all that remained was darkness. She had chosen this path a long time ago, but she never thought it would lead to a night like this. It wasn't just the loss of a loved one, it was the loss of herself. On the second floor, others were watching the chaos below. Each one carried a piece of truth, a piece of guilt, a piece of motive. None of them were entirely innocent. And that was what made the house feel like a bomb with the safety pin pulled, just waiting to explode. And then it happened. Vanessa stepped out of the dark hallway, her body straight but her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't the center of all the suspicion, not the one being accused, but deep down, she knew this moment would change everything. When Donald's eyes met hers, the room fell silent. No more banging on the table, no more screaming, just a long, suffocating silence. Vanessa's words fell, slow, clear, cruel, like a cold thunderclap tearing through the already thick air. The truth about her relationship with Joey was more than a personal mistake. It was the final link in a chain of betrayals that stretched from generation to generation, from generation to generation. Donnell paused, his gaze unfocused. In that moment, the entire house held its breath. Everyone knew that once this secret was exposed, everything they had ever believed in would be worthless. Donnell took a step back, not because he was weak, but because the raging waves inside him were screaming. He had believed he could control everything, people, emotions, interests, but now, everything was slipping through his fingers like sand. He looked at Vanessa, who he had once considered the only bright spot in this chaos, and realized that she was the one who held the key to unlocking everything he had tried to hide. Bill, Andre, Haley, Danny, each felt as if an invisible knife had been cut deeper into their hearts. All the masks had fallen away, revealing their true faces, twisted, greedy, weak, and full of hatred. Anita held her grandchild tighter, tears falling on her wrinkled hands. She knew this moment was not the beginning, this was the result of years of lies, of decisions everyone believed were for family. But the so-called family had become a luxurious prison. Where handshakes were a cover for calculations, where smiles hid the stabs in their backs, where everyone wanted to win, forgetting that once war broke out, no one would be left unscathed. Outside, it was dark. The yellow light cast on people's faces made them look like ghosts wandering in their own homes. No one spoke. No one wanted to hear anything anymore. The only question hanging over everyone's mind was not, who was right, but, who would strike first. Because in a war where the truth had been twisted, the ones who survived were not the fair ones, but the cruelest. Donnell turned away, but there was no way out. Haley clenched her jaw, Danny stood still as a statue, Bill and Andre still trembled with rage. Anita closed her eyes, praying what she knew was a futile wish. Vanessa looked at those faces, people who had once called each other family, and knew that from that night on, each of them would be either predator or prey. At the end of the hallway, the half-closed door to the basement was still open. Below was a cache of documents that no one wanted to talk about. No one looked in that direction, but everyone knew the truth was even more brutal than what had just been said. And when one secret was exposed, there was always another waiting to swallow it all up. The night had receded into the depths, leaving behind a house filled with heavy silence. No one spoke a word to anyone. Each person walked in a different direction, like ghosts sliding through the hallway, carrying unseen wounds. On the tile floor, a rainwater trail from someone's shoe lingered like an indelible mark, not knowing if it was from the person who left or the person who never returned. Donnell stood by the window, watching the light outside the gate flicker like a dying flame. Inside him, a mixture of hatred, loss, and revenge surged violently. Somewhere in the house, Vanessa sat silently, knowing that from the moment she opened her mouth to tell the truth, all paths back were buried. Upstairs, Haley stood alone, silently looking down at the dark courtyard. Danny disappeared into the darkness without a trace, only the cold breath whistling through the crack in the door like a warning. Andre closed the door tightly, but the look in his eyes before he left said it all. He knew something the others didn't. Outside, the wind picked up in gusts, blowing away the dry leaves and the false peace that remained. The Dupree house was no longer a shelter, it had become a silent battlefield where every step could lead to a stab in the back. Tonight, there were no winners. There were only temporary survivors, and secrets waiting to be unearthed.